cutting right now for the square table topper using the blending 9-patch technique. I've already cut my fabric one, which I cut the 3.5-inch strips first. Then you turn them sideways and cut off the 3.5-inch squares. So it tells you on the instructions how many squares you need to end up with. I've also cut the 1.5-inch strips and set them aside here. This is fabric 2 on the cutting table, and I like this method for cutting the 1.5-inch strips. I think it's the most accurate. I use a 12-inch ruler to line up on the outside fold line so that when my first cut, I'm straightening the end of the fabric, getting rid of any little fuzzies we don't want to have. Then I use this 4.5, or I use a 6.5-inch ruler, or you can use another 12-inch ruler, and you put it along here at the 1.5-inch mark. Also, I use this 12-inch ruler along here to make sure that it's still square on the fabric, so I'm not cutting crooked as I go. So I'm going to cut, for fabric 2, it says cut 13 1.5-inch strips. To show you again, this is my 12-inch ruler. I'm using the dots and lines that are on this ruler to put it along the fold line on the fabric to make sure that it's square. I'm using this one to mark my 1.5 inches. So I make sure it's square, and then I have 1.5 inches the full distance here, and then I cut. This is strip 9 out of fabric 2. I do the same thing when I go to cut the 3.5-inch strips, only now I'm going to use the 3.5-inch mark on the little ruler. Still lining up my dots along on the 12-inch ruler. Now I have a 3.5-inch strip. Oops. So on this strip, the 3.5-inch strips, you turn them sideways, open them up, turn them sideways. You're going to trim off your salvages and use the same method with the small ruler, marking your 3.5 inches, making sure that you're straight and square before you cut your 3.5-inch squares. The next section of your directions for cutting is to band and label your strip sets. You're going to take 5 of the fabric that you're working on, so that would be first fabric 1, and 4 of fabric 2, band them together. My favorite method is the rubber band, and attach the label that this is a 1-2 strip set. And that set is ready to sew. So I'm going to demonstrate cutting the half square triangle and the quarter square triangles. First and going back and readjusting the edge of my fabric, that with my cutting I've gotten off a little bit, so I'm straightening it. So the 4 half square triangles are cut at 3 7/8, making sure my rulers are all nice and straight and lined up. 3 7/8. I'm going to only cut one. It's cut like the 3.5-inch triangles where you turn them to cut the squares. So you're going to cut squares. It tells you how many squares to cut to make the half square triangles you need to make. This directions cut at 3 7/8. 3 7/8. Also. And you have a square. Then you take your ruler, and it's a good thing to double check using your 45 degree angle, and you run from corner to corner and cut, and now you have your half square triangles. To cut the quarter square triangle, you need to cut a 4.5-inch square. There's no need to cut an entire strip, so if you cut that as the last piece that you're cutting, you can just cut enough to cut your square. Oh, it's not 4.5, it's 4 1/4. I almost made a mistake there. 4 1/4. lining up my dots on the edge of the fabric to get this to be square. Cutting across. Oops, it didn't cut. Okay. And 4 1/4 in this direction. What is with this? Sorry, that's frustrating. I'm going to trim off that little ear I accidentally left behind. So you take your ruler, using that 45-degree angle again, line it up on the corner, so you're cutting corner to corner. Without moving the fabric, line that same 45-degree angle up on the other corner of the fabric. And you end up with 4 1/4 square triangles. These are used on the corners of the table runner and the placemats.